The session is designed in a way that participants will be divided into breakout rooms for more focused discussion in the later part of the workshop. We will shortly be giving you the details when that agenda item will come into. I would now like to invite Mr. Utsav Chaudhary, the team lead BASIC program, to give you the welcome address and introduction about BASIC program. Utsav.
Thank you, Kanika. I hope everyone can hear me loud and clear. And do apologies if the internet connection is a little patchy. Kanika's voice was a little phasing out in between. I hope you can hear me loud and clear. As Kanika has rightly said, today's session is more about understanding what more can be done to make the cities more inclusive, and hence everyone's opinions matter, and which is why we have so many people joining us today, which in itself is such a wonderful thing to see. I think we are roughly at 62 people right now, and we hope we get more of you to join us during the session. So to formally today's workshop, I would like to first respectfully sort of give my gratitude to the city officials, members from the disability groups, and even our colleagues and fellows who have joined us today. To all of you, it's a delight and honor for me to be welcoming you all to the workshop. It matters a lot for us. We've been working very hard for the last 2 years to ensure that this day was here where we could discuss this with you and get your opinions. So it matters a lot that there's so many of us, so many of you have joined us today. Starting with a brief introduction to our institution, the National Institute of Urban Affairs is a premier think tank of the Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs. The institution takes pride in incorporating the aspect of inclusion across our working in research, knowledge management, and advocacy work on urban issues and challenges. Just recently, as NIUA turned 45, the strategy document of the Inclusive Cities Center was launched to dedicatedly facilitate inclusion in the urban realm. At the center, we aim to improve urban productivity and quality for life, be it for women, children, elderly, youth, or persons with disabilities. As part of that, a program that is housed under the center is called the Building Accessible, Safe, Inclusive Indian Cities. Sorry if it's a mouthful, and we call it BASIC to make it easy for ourselves. It's a program that is supported by the Foreign Commonwealth and Development Office, FCDO, erstwhile referred to as DFID, and is one of the key anchoring projects under the Inclusive Cities Center. Now, the project is focused on mainstreaming the conversation on disability, and it does so by focusing on universal accessibility, safety, and inclusion for the marginalized demographics, which includes persons with disability and the lens of disability to the groups such as elderly, children, and women. Well, on top of that, the program has been working very, very closely with quite a few cities, most importantly, Varanasi as an intervention city that we have been working in for the past 2 years. Since its inception, the program has also supported the government agencies, which includes our own ministry and the Ministry of Social Justice, so civil society organizations and academic institutions to sort of mainstream the conversation in all spheres of life. So far, we have been successful in our endeavors to bring the topic of inclusion to the forefront. At least that's what we hope we are doing at the moment. This has all been because of the support and enthusiasm of stakeholders much like you and the nodal ministries on either end. Today's agenda for discussion, the Inclusive Cities Framework, is a byproduct of all the efforts and the outcome of the strategic partnership and discussions that we have had with the IIT Kharagpur team. That being said, I would like to warmly welcome Professor Shubhrat Chattopadhyay and Professor Hoymanti Banerjee, our partners in change, who have been spearheading this endeavor from IIT Kharagpur. To summarize, because we have a good 10-15 minutes dedicated to explaining what this framework is about, but what I would like to say is that the framework will and hopefully will help us assess the performance of cities and advocate the need to shift towards inclusion and universal access. Today, what we have in the workshop is a broad group of well-informed people and facilitators who are keen on making the cities more livable and improving the quality of life for all. As such, the workshop today has been designed to initiate the discussion on how to strategize the successful implementation of inclusive interventions. The workshop would allow the participants to equally engage and contribute. We hope to achieve and expect out of today's gathering to have a very active discussion on how this framework can be successful in the cities. Would also like to hear from you if there are any areas of improvement that can be made in the framework itself, which is why we have so many of our team members joining us today. So before I proceed further in the session, I'd like to thank you all for taking the time out, and I do hope you enjoy the session as much as we do. Kanika, back to you.
Thank you, sir, for an inspiring welcome address. I'm sure that with the support and active participation from the cities and our colleagues, we'll be able to bring significant change in the urban contour with regards to accessibility and inclusivity. On this note, I would now like to invite Mr. Ajay Suri, Senior Advisor and Head of Inclusive City Center, to give the introduction to the workshop and express his expectations from the session. Mr. Suri is an economist and a development expert with long-standing experience in formulating strategies and managing people-centered development programs in India and countries in Asia sub-region, among others. Mr. Suri, over to you.
Thank you, Kanika, and thanks for the kind introduction. Let me join Utsav and Kanika to welcome all the participants in today's workshop. And at the onset, I would like to congratulate the BASIC team, including colleagues from NIUA and IIT Kharagpur, for their tireless effort in formulating the inclusive cities framework. As all of us are aware that we are celebrating the Amrit Mahotsav to commemorate the 75th year of independence. Looking at the past 74 years, we would all agree that we as a nation have made tremendous progress in improving the quality of life of citizens and are on the fast track to achieve the target of $5 trillion GDP economy. But our society has also been a living representation of the Marx theory of individualism and have transformed from a close knitted community to a more fragmented community. Urban living has become complex, and layers of complexities are further added for persons with disabilities, senior citizens living alone, children with working parents, autistic children, and working mothers. We urgently need an enabling environment in our cities to support independent living and ensure empowerment of all demographics, irrespective of their disability, age, and gender. The ongoing pandemic has further reinforced the need for inclusion and building cities for all. The challenges posed by COVID point to point at how inclusion and universal access should be mainstreamed in the entire urban ecosystem, from physical environment to governance to information dissemination. Gladly, the Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs has been cognizant of these challenges. Just last year, the ministry launched the Nurturing Neighborhood Challenge and shortlisted 25 out of 65 cities to implement pilot projects to make them child friendly. Gender inclusion has been another important consideration in formulating the policies and programs. Model guidelines for development of retirement homes was another such initiative in response to the Rent Regulation Act. The basic program is also the brainchild of the consultation on Divyang friendly smart cities that was chaired by Shri Hardeep Singh Puri, our Honorable Minister of Housing and Urban Affairs, way back in 2018. One of the key recommendations that came out of the consultation was the review and revision of existing policies and guidelines. Since the inception of the program, we have been working very closely with IIT Kharagpur to integrate aspects of universal design and inclusive development into the city planning framework. It has resulted in the revisions of the urban and regional development plans, formulation and implementation guidelines, the URDP-FI guidelines, which is under review by the ministry. The team also went a step ahead and prepared a simple checklist in the form of inclusive city framework that can help city stakeholders, the decision makers, urban practitioners, and implementers to seamlessly adopt and implement the guidelines in all aspects of urban development. The framework will additionally help to make sector wise assessment of cities in terms of safety, accessibility, and inclusivity, and also help to plan greenfield cities with inclusion as the primary objective. We hope that this tool will enable all communities to have equitable access to public services in the city, irrespective of their differential abilities. I must congratulate the team who, despite the unprecedented COVID induced situation, has managed to interact with different individuals and organizations and made the process of ICF development both participatory and inclusive. We plan to scale it up across cities in India and look forward to collaborating with cities for adoption of ICF. We want to handhold the cities and support them on the path of inclusion and partner for implementation of inclusive cities framework, as well as collaborate for place-making projects. We envision uh, ICF will find its way to be one of the critical ranking systems of the cities, just like the Ease of Living Index. We are hopeful that you, as important stakeholders in city development and empowerment of marginalized communities, could help us in identifying the strategies as well as highlight any scope of improvement, making our efforts a success. BASIC, as well as the framework, was formulated through partnerships, collaborations, and joint efforts, all indicative of how an initiative or intervention can only be successful with the collective efforts of all stakeholders. It is with this thought that once again I am optimistic that this national workshop on guidelines and standards on inclusive development in India will be significant in the implementation of the inclusive cities framework. Let me end it here. And once again, my heartiest congratulations to the teams. And thank you all for considering this workshop as a matter of importance and participating in it. Over to you, Kanika. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir, for your encouraging speech and recounting on how far we have come on the path of inclusion since the program's inception. It has truly been an encouraging 2 years. I would now like to request Professor Subrata Chattopadhyay and Professor Hemanti Banerjee to take us through the inclusive city framework, its process, and the scope of implementation. Professor and Dr. Subrata Chattopadhyay is the former head of Department of Architecture, IIT Kharagpur, and former Dean of Alumni Affairs, IIT Kharagpur. He comes he brings over 33 years of experience with specialization in affordable housing and urban planning. Thanks for joining us today, sir. Professor Hemanti Banerjee brings in more than 13 years of experience, and with her specialization in universal design, she was one of the co-authors in the formulation of Universal Design India principle and has been pioneer in the formulation of inclusivity framework. Thank you, ma'am, for joining us today, and over to both of you.
Thank you, Kanika. So, we have prepared a small presentation. Maybe I will share it, and after Professor Chattopadhyay introduces it, I would complete the presentation and just take our participants through the process.
Okay, so would you like me to say a few things and then you start the PPT? Or which way do you want?
As you wish. I mean, I'm just sharing it here.
Share the screen. Okay,
Yes.
Great.
So you just can introduce the concept of, then I'll carry on.
Okay.
Is it visible?
It is.
Okay.
So, good afternoon, one and all. I mean, it's a very, very important and I would say a historic day. And very interestingly, we will all go down in the annals of history. So when this basic, that is accessible, safe and inclusive Indian cities, when this was discussed at the very nascent stage, I hope I am audible to everybody. Anika?
We can hear you, Professor Chattopadhyay.
Yeah, you're audible.
Great. So when at the nascent stage, the concept of BASIC came up, and then we had some very, interesting consultations, discussions, and the way forward was kind of, chalked out. I felt that really, really we are moving in the right direction, because to make our cities accessible and inclusive is something which was, long overlooked. And we were making islands of excellence among, vast oceans of segregation. So how do we make the entire city at the city level inclusive is extremely important. And why? Why do we say it's so important? Because that would avoid discrimination and segregation due to presence of any of these, sensory, attitudinal, cognitive, physical, or even economic barriers. When we tried to conceptualize inclusive cities, we thought that it should ensure that everyone includes all people with different ables, and the elderly and children, and also women, parents with children, all of them can equally participate in the city. Can I get back to the previous one, Hemanti? Yeah. So as you can see, the boxes here: sense of security, psychological comfort, economic independence, decent quality of life, feeling of self-worth. That's very, very important. When we did, I'll talk about that later, when we did our questionnaire survey, and I'm happy to say that in spite of all the pandemic related difficulties, we could muster not less than 256 samples, and we surveyed them. So we had been really toiling hard. We had been going and reaching out to several organizations, and we felt this feeling of self-worth is a very important aspect. You should, or everybody should, feel similarly and have a feel of self-worth. Social acceptance, that's equally important, and safety. So these were some of the visions that we thought an inclusive city should have. Next one, please. Can we have the next slide? Yeah. So I will request my colleague Hemanti to go through the next part of the slide. But this is what is the beginning. This is the motivation, and she will talk about the details of the entire work that we did in collaboration with NIUA. We had several rounds of consultation, and what we have today is a culmination of a long put effort. And I thank each and every one of you from all the organizations that have come, that have taken their time out. And with you, I'm sure that we will make it a grand success, this program. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Professor Chattopadhyay. I will take over now. So as Professor Chattopadhyay mentioned that we were targeting to plan for a city which will be safe, accessible, and inclusive. Now, for that, we started by identification of the target group. Other than considering the various functional limitations like physical impairment, vision impairment, sensory impairment, intellectual, functional, cognitive, and disability, we have also included people who are aged, children, and also sometimes women. So this was our target group, and while we were approaching the problem, while we were approaching our task, we just revisited the various changing approaches and models of visibility, that how the approach changed from a medical model or a charity-based model in 1980s, and how to the current approach of ICF, that is International Classification of Functioning, and the capability approach. So moving from how the society, how the approach, how the designers, how the service providers have moved from normalization to empowerment, how we have moved from sympathy to empathy, and how we have started believing that the barrier is not within a person, the problem is not within a person, and they be treated as others, but the barrier is actually within the environment. From there, that is the social model. From there, moving on which led to a lot of social awareness and sensitization. From there, how we have currently moved on to the capability approach or capability set, which talks about providing a basket or set of opportunities to the people, to all people, so that to empower them so that they are to increase their participation, to increase their activity, which will have a direct impact on their well-being. So we have to identify that basket of opportunities in terms of physical environment, in terms of enabling policies, in terms of social attitude, in terms of overall holistic approach. We look into the ICF, that which talks about the personal factors, considering the personal factors, environmental factors, service factors, cultural factors, and the legal factors. So with this background, our project, as Mr. Suri explained, that it had two objectives. One was the revision of the URDPFI guidelines. We have done the relevant additions and alterations and insertions in the URDPFI, which is under review now, and the ICF, so that is the inclusive city framework, which will have a dual purpose. Now, that is why we have met here today. Like the ICF is, we wanted to discuss it with the stakeholders. So it has a dual purpose. So first is performance assessment of the existing cities in terms of accessibility, safety, and inclusivity. And of course, inclusive planning of the greenfield cities. So this was our methodology. Like after we had decided our theme and objectives, we went through a process of exhaustive data collection, like the review of the existing guidelines, acts which are available in India as well as abroad. Then we went for a gap analysis of the existing documents which are available. From there, we identified sectors of intervention, because we are looking forward to inclusive cities. So now when we talk about inclusive cities, we means urban places, services, and systems which should be accessible. So which are those 6 sectors that we had identified? And as Professor Dr. just mentioned, that the entire process was through participation and feedback. We had a couple of previous workshops here. We got our work peer reviewed by a group of experts, also incorporated their feedback. So we had been working in NIUA, and our team had been working together with involving people. From there, we finally came up with the components of inclusive city, and then which were actually instrumental in modifying the URDPFI. This part we are not going to discuss today. We are going to discuss the ICF, which is applicable for the new and the existing cities. Now, these are some of the acts and guidelines which we have reviewed, starting from the national acts, the national guidelines, and also some of the international guidelines, that the global age-friendly cities and the UNICEF guidelines on the child-friendly cities. We also looked into many best practices. Now, since our approach will be pan-city as well as sector-wise, so we have taken up both examples, both successful examples. Like we have taken up a successful examples from New York, which was the pan-city approach. We had taken up some very specific examples from Sydney, for example, which had a braille and tactile network for vision impaired. So there were certain very specific sector-specific approaches as well as some pan-city approaches. Now, after that, referring to these and also checking these, so these were some of the components which we had identified from the best practices and guidelines. And there were also we checked the legal, what is our current legal backup, that is as provided by the Persons with the Disability Act 2016. So combining these two, we have identified 6 sectors of intervention. The first one being the housing, physical and social infrastructure, outdoor environment, livelihood, because our PWD Act gives a lot of stress on livelihood, the urban mobility and public transport, IT connectivity, digitization and citizens participation, and tourism and recreation. So now, after we identified these 6 sectors, now we were also did a URDPFI gap analysis, but that's separate. I might skip that now. So coming to the ICF. So Now I will be explaining the ICF document, and we would be welcoming the purpose of this is to welcome your feedback on this. Now, while framing the ICF, we have also referred to the UDIP. We are all aware of the universal design, the global universal design 7 principles. So these are the UDIP, or the 5 principles, Indian principles, which were developed by a group of experts in which I was also involved. Anjali, I think she's here today. She was also involved, and many others. So, and these 5 principles were Sahaj, Saman, Sanskritik, Sasta, and Sundar. Something which is inclusive. We cannot call it really inclusive if it is a privilege of, if it can be only accessed by a privileged few. So it has to be also affordable. So we have given a lot of stress on economic, it has to be affordable. So it has to be culturally acceptable. It has to be, I mean, we cannot always copy some international principles if they are not culturally acceptable, because India is a diverse country with different culture, different language. So culturally acceptable, and also it has to be appealing, because I mean, we urban designers and architects and city planners, we give a lot of value to aesthetic for place making and improving the imageability of the cities. So with this, we also studied some very good examples from some of the smart cities of our country, like this, the All Ability Children Park, Beach Road, Visakhapatnam. There was the Balti Park in Chennai. Then the accessible beaches in Chennai, the Marina Beach, the inclusive school at Varanasi. So some of the very good initiatives taken in our country, which are acceptable by our country. So we did that. These also we have studied, because as I said that we wanted to frame a checklist to other recommendations which should be Indianized, because we are ultimately looking for safe, accessible, and inclusive Indian cities. Accessible streets in Pune, and of course the DMRC, which is one of the pioneer in this inclusive city movement. Okay, now what are the steps towards an inclusive city? We have to, since we are planning for a strategic accessibility analysis, it will be a lot of data collection. So it will start with an audit. We have identified a 5-step approach to be followed by the urban local bodies. So the first one will be the safety, accessibility, and inclusivity audit. So for that, we actually have prepared a checklist. A checklist of comprising of 196 measurable indicators under the 6 sectors which I just mentioned. And also a citizen perception survey. Then we have devised a system of rating, a star rating, inclusivity rating, inclusivity score. So we have the system that we have proposed. We'll show it here. That actually makes it possible to give the city a holistic score, and also sector-specific score. So that if one particular sector is to be improved upon, we exactly know which is the priority area, or which is probably the sector where the city is performing maybe poorly. Then the next step would be to propose the guidelines. So for inclusive planning, so these are the basic documents to be referred to, and it should be ensuring the engagement of all stakeholders and then after taking the feedback, a future pathway in terms of planning, implementation, and review. So for that also we have proposed a mechanism. Now, these are the 6 sectors which I mentioned: housing, physical, social infrastructure, outdoor environment, transport, connectivity, livelihood, dictation. So these 6 sectors have further been divided into 23 components. And these 23 components have again been divided into 196 measurable indicators. So just to give a few examples, like say the first one, that is the housing and physical and social infrastructure, where clean, safe, accessible, and affordable institutional homes are available, where 100% of residents have access to a public healthcare center within a walking distance of 1 kilometer, What are the ward level activities, initiatives taken to involve senior citizens? So these are just three. As I said, there are 67 indicators. So just a few I'm indicating over here. For the outdoor environment, whether 100% of the public places have adequate wayfinding information, whether the pavements are safe, accessible, as per now the checklist is there to explain, to talk about in detail. Similarly, for livelihood, options of employment, special transport, the school to work transition program for vulnerable groups. In the urban mobility, likewise for urban mobility, the IT connectivity, for example, if a mobile app is available which is accessible. Now, if that's whether the city has an advisory forum or for accessibility and inclusion. For recreation and tourism, whether there is a single point accessible tourist help desk is available. Whether the 100% of tourist destinations are connected by safe, accessible, inclusive transport. Because Professor Chadapati just mentioned that we can create islands, we can create 100% accessible islands, but we also need to think of seamless accessibility, so that a person should be able to come out of his home, walk through an accessible pavement, get into a public transport that is accessible, get down to a place which is again accessible, and to the building or a premises which is accessible, and come back the same way. So that actually is the seamless accessibility. So that is a physical thing, but also there are virtual accessibility, what we talk of. The websites, if someone wants to pay online the property tax, that also should be a system that should be accessible. Someone wants to plan for a tour, so that also the tourism website should also be accessible. So this is how we have worked on these exhaustive list of indicators, and we look forward to feedback from the inclusive cities stakeholders, representatives from vulnerable group, the experts from in the field of urban planning, the NGOs who work with the target group, and the public and private service providers of various urban services and systems. So with this, we move on to the city score or star rating system. Now here, we have thought of three types of rating. Like one is, it is percentage of desired value. Say we talk about whether the footpaths are accessible, and what we find that about 90% of the total length of footpath in the city are accessible. 90% or 80% of the total city buses are accessible, low floor buses. So that is one way of explaining. That is a percentage where we can calculate the percentage. So many percentage of affordable housing units are accessible. So many schools are accessible. That's one way of rating, that is collecting the numbers and working on the percentage. Second is the qualitative response. That is whether the level of satisfaction. Someone is satisfied with the reliability of public transport. So that's a qualitative statement. You cannot really measure that. So that's something qualitative. Or cleanliness of the public spaces. That's also qualitative. Or the sense of security while walking in a crowded place. That's also something which is qualitative. So that's the qualitative measurement scale. Then we have the binary response, that is whether it is accessible, not accessible, or it is partially accessible. So based on that, we have thought of a star rating whereby we go from 0 to 5, the numerical scores. And then for every sector, we come up with the maximum value and the minimum value. So then what we have done is that points and the star rating. So this is the total that can be obtained. It is maximum achievable value is 980 because there are 196 total indicators, and so this will be the overall star rating of that a city can have. So the values we have said that it is 90%, that is more than 90% of 980, that is 82 to above, 90% above is a 5-star rating, and we have not considered anything which is less than 50% rating. So this is the star rating system that we have proposed for finding the inclusivity of a city. Now next, coming to implementation and financing. So this we have proposed that what we believe strongly that inclusion should be a cross-cutting principle for a municipal activity. So every DPR when is being provided, it must include all associated cost. Now, also we have proposed in some inclusive cities cell, so which can actually within the urban local body, which will be actually be owning having the ownership, or will be looking to or responsible for the planning process, day-to-day implementation, review, and monitoring. Also, there could be third-party monitoring and all. Now, we suggest a mechanism for monitoring, review, and validation. Like this is a format for monitoring and review of scores. Say a particular sector 1, there are so many components and so many indicators. So what is the current score? What is the final score? And the phasing if done, that within this time, what is the target? What did they achieve? So a simple kind of checklist could be used for upgrading or for improving the score by the urban local bodies from a particular, for each indicator for each sector. So that's how it will be very clear, very transparent that I mean the performance assessment and performance improvement. Now CPS, what we propose is that we are proposing a closed group of interaction, like first round of closed group interaction where from all the 6 vulnerable groups, the citizen perception survey will be conducted against to find their perception against the accessibility safety. Then it will be after the implementation or partial implementation or phase 1 is done, there will be a second group or round of closed group interview with the same set of representatives, and the changes will be noted and which should be statistically measured. That's it. I'm almost towards the end of it. So this is the overall flow chart that we have thought about, like starting with the audit, setting the city-specific, I repeat, city-specific, sector-specific goals and objectives, and formulating the plans and integrating with the current master plan, current mobility improvement plan, current other plans that the city might be having. Project identification, procurement tendering, and then phasing it out, and then having a feedback mechanism, and it is a loop and it should follow the process. That is it. Do we, Kanika, I would like to request you to intervene here. Do we take the feedback now or we take the feedback at the end?
No, ma'am, we'll take the feedback at the end, depending upon the time available with us.
Okay. I think then that's all. I've just completed explaining the mandate of our project. So now I think it's over to you, Kanika. You can explain the purpose of today's workshop and how we move ahead.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, ma'am, and thank you so much, Chattopadhyay sir, for taking us through the ICF Inclusive Cities framework. I hope that all the participants would have at least gotten an idea and a perception about the framework. I know that it's a very detailed framework, and it would be requiring some in-depth study to actually, make oneself understand the framework completely. But you have very well given us the idea about what the framework is, what is the scope of work, what it could actually help the cities and the urban practitioners as well as the disability experts to in making cities more inclusive and achieving the vision of cities for all. So on this, thank you so much, ma'am and sir, for taking us through the entire framework. On this note, I would like to request those of you who have not registered and have not been nominated or have not we don't have your email IDs with us, kindly fill up the registration form so that we can keep you posted with the proceedings of the workshop as well as the future endeavors which we'll be taking up for the Inclusive City framework. This will help us to keep a record of your email ID. Thank you so much. Now we would like to proceed on to our next agenda item, which is a group discussion. The group discussion is based basically kind of designed in a way that we get an understanding about the inclusive development which each of us has, and it will also get us an idea about which are the priorities we think our cities have among the 6 sectors available, and which are the areas where the cities need to work and where inclusive city framework could actually help the cities. So before we proceed, we will be dividing. I will be dividing all of you into breakout rooms. We'll be having 4 breakout rooms, which will be having one representative either from IIT Kharagpur or NIUA basic team to take you through the journey. It is a slightly time consuming thing. So to utilize the time, we have also designed a small feedback form. Some of you would have already filled in. Some of you, those of you who have not filled it in, kindly, the links are there in the chat box. You may fill it in, which will, it's a small feedback which will basically help us grasp the understanding of inclusive development and areas which we have. Anuradha ma'am, do you want to say something?
No, ma'am, sorry. I was just looking for a chat box.
All right. Thank you. Okay. So let's take 5 minutes off. Meanwhile, I'll also assign the breakout room to each of us. Thank you. I hope everyone is able to fill up the forms. Should I open the? I would like to now open the breakout rooms. So each of the Zoom has been. I have assigned all the Zooms to all the people. Welcome back, everyone. I hope we all had a meaningful and a successful discussion. Before summarizing the discussion, I would like to present a glimpse of our questionnaire analysis. For this, I would like to request Antara, who represents our partner organization CIVIS, to make give a glimpse of the questionnaire feedback form which you all have filled in. CIVIS is a non-profit platform that works to enable effective dialogue between governments and citizens on draft laws and policies. Through its online platform and on-ground programs, the organization has conducted consultations on over 143 laws and policies, with feedback gathered from 240 plus cities and towns pan-India. So over to you, Antya.
Thank you very much, Kanika. And as somebody has pointed out in the chat, it has been a very interactive session. I'd just like to urge everyone, if you have not had a chance to fill in the feedback form, please do so immediately. We have been analyzing some of the responses as they are coming in. To that effect, Kanika, is it all right if you could or Divya could perhaps share the links once again, just so that everyone has a chance to respond? Thank you, Kanika. Just to quickly, before we go into the results and analysis, the feedback form that you see on in the chat window is, in fact, just a second. I'll just be sharing my screen. It's just a few quick questions on accessible initiatives undertaken in your city. What are the major bottlenecks in making your city accessible? What planning documents are available? This questionnaire should not take more than a few minutes, and I'd urge you to please submit it as through the duration of this call. For a few of us, the feedback has already been submitted, and I'm excited to share some of the findings that we have found from the feedback that has come in so far. I will just present my screen. Among feedback from urban local body practitioners, we have seen that the sectors in which accessibility initiatives have been taken prior or already been taken in the city, social infrastructure is perhaps one of the highest, with 20% of respondents stating that initiatives have already been taken. In addition to that, that is followed by physical infrastructure, outdoor spaces, and tourism, which all come in at the second place of the highest rankers. Education, urban facilities, employment, health, rail transport, and road transport come in subsequent to that. Perceived bottlenecks in making the city accessible to vulnerable groups. some of the non-profit CSOs, as well as organizations and individuals working in the disability space, have shared that a lack of technical knowledge, a lack of trained manpower in the ULB, a lack of funds, and as well as a lack of awareness regarding existing guidelines has perceived to be a bottleneck in ensuring accessibility. However, with the ICF that the BASIC program has put out, and with your active participation today, as well as in the lead up to this conversation, I am certain that some of these bottlenecks in terms of awareness and also technical knowledge can be bridged by us collaboratively as we look to ensure that our cities are made safe and accessible. Lastly, in addition to what we have shared, from the feedback that we have gathered, it has been predominantly funds that have been one of the challenges reported by respondents who have come in today. Lack of trained manpower has been a fraction of that. However, the larger bottleneck seems to be in availability of funds. Taking a bird's eye view of all of the diverse feedback that we have gotten, as well as the feedback that was shared immediately prior to this, infrastructure comes upon as one of the largest or most recurrent themes that everyone has mentioned today. Infrastructure has been mentioned in multiple contexts to make it more accessible. In addition to that, facilities like underpasses, primary health facilities, markets, auditoriums, public spaces as a whole have also come out as some of the thematic areas that respondents are concerned about and are actually keen to come in and share feedback on. I would like to encourage everyone again just to share your feedback from this exercise, and also quickly just respond to the questionnaire. I believe that will really help us gather a lot of in-depth insight and data. Also data and information that can help us ensure that we reach out to you after this call and take the momentum forward for all of the initiatives and ideas that you might have suggested. Kanika, I'd like to hand it back to you, and perhaps if through the duration of this call anyone would like to submit feedback, please do so. The links are in the chat box to the right.
Thank you so much, Angela, and it was lovely collaborating with you, and having a very structured way of collating all the feedbacks from our participants and the stakeholders involved in this process. I would now like to invite the moderators or the representatives who are present in each of the group. So, starting with Utsav, whom would you like to have from your group to share the insights which was there in the discussion?
I would love to invite any of the city participants, but I don't see them. I think they have dropped off. So what I will do is I'll ask one of my colleagues, KK, and myself will sort of take turns in sort of running through what our observations were from the Jamboard session. Let me take first stab at it. So on the question of what does inclusion mean to each of you? So I think there were some really interesting approaches to it. The words that sort of jump out at me are the sense of belongingness, active part of the city, barrier-free, community spaces for all, safety. So these are all concepts that have been touched upon in ICF, and I do feel really grateful for the fact that people are thinking in that direction. And generally speaking, when we talk about inclusion, we are referring to the fact that it is about bringing the minority or the marginalized communities into the mainstream and understanding their issues. KK, if I may just quickly ask you to sort of jump us through the slide 2, which is the most relevant sector that we identified during the Jamboard session. KK, are you there? Okay. Looks like KK is having some technical troubles. Nonetheless, what I'll do is I'll run through the most of the findings that we have from this particular Jamboard session. So as far as the most relevant sector goes, so the most relevant sector that was highlighted during the session was mobility and public transport. One of our team members, Anuradha ji from Chennai Smart Cities, rightly pointed out that it is one of the most relevant sectors for a very, very important reason, because it allows you to access different parts of the city from an individual's perspective, and also from the city's perspective. Mobility and public transport and other transport options allow you to move resources around. So whether it is going to a place of work or whether it is about delivering services to people, it is all dependent on transport system, and hence their choice of going with mobility and public transport. When it came to the most lacking sector, I think it was probably a neck and neck sort of with livelihood and again public transport. That being said, what also something that interesting came out was that the weightage for these sectors might not be the same for each of the cities, and they would like to prioritize it differently, meaning some cities would feel tourism and recreation is important, while others might feel mobility and public transport are important. So, which is why the group is little distributed on this. We have almost equal number of votes going in. Now, when it comes to how will the city framework be useful, I think most of them sort of went towards focused interventions. That this framework would eventually help them to bring more focused interventions or design more focused interventions towards achieving inclusion for all. And lastly, what is the most critical sort of barrier or challenge towards implementation? I think it was a split between data gaps and lack of capacities, which kind of indicates that most of what we are asking for in terms of data from the framework might be something that we have to sort of invent or retrofit in terms of how we arrive at that data point, and the capacity that is required to sort of collect this information and be up to date as through time and in temporal sense. So that's pretty much a summary of where we were from the first group. Kanika, back to you.
Thank you so much, Utsav. I think it was a very insightful things which have come across, and data being one of the prime concern of implementation of not only inclusive city framework but any framework for that matter. Now let's go to the group which Hemanti ma'am was kind of representing us in the group 2. So, ma'am, would you or any of your group members like to just summarize the findings in the group?
I may invite Anjali ma'am. Would you like to summarize, or else I can share the Jamboard as you wish?
Thank you, Hemanti. I was just enjoying the exercise simultaneously. I actually feel there are a couple of other factors that needs to be roped in, because when we are talking about inclusion or accessibility or making the cities fully inclusive and accessible, there are certain other things which are left out. For example, the disaggregated data, which are written in others, which needs to be looked at in a big way. Funding has been talked about, infrastructure has been talked about. What about looking at people with high support need? Because that is not looked at in a big way. So how do you create cities which are accessible and inclusive for people with high support need and connected to this particular kind of vulnerable group? Two more factors: gender and age. So if there's a person with severe disability and then age and gender are added, then how would that person look at a city and make use of the city infrastructure or city governance and participation and being safe and feel dignified? So these are some of the common factors that needs to be added as well.
Thanks, Anjali. Thanks a lot. Maybe I will just quickly share the screen and where and our Jamboard results can be seen. Okay, so this is what we have got for what does inclusion means to you, and where we have got stress upon equality, equity at par with others, food to all, and what Anjali just now said, I have added that the need for people with high support need, and also this is something what we have got that moving beyond the monoculture as of the mind. So that's another dimension of inclusion. So the next what we have is when we were talking about the most relevant sectors, interestingly, we have got a lot of importance on livelihood. Yeah, this we absolutely agree to. And when we were, because today in the introductory session, I was talking about opportunities, a basket of opportunities to be provided to increase the wellness of the person who is living there. So definitely livelihood has got a lot of direct correlation with providing opportunities. And other than definitely the sectors that we have thought of, housing and infrastructure, that has also got importance. Next is we were talking about the most lacking sector. So here this is a bit of concern where most of the sectors we have seen that they have got high ratings. That is a circle, which is the high rating where livelihood, housing, all the sectors have got high ratings. So probably that means we have to look into every aspect of urban places, services, and systems for a total inclusion, for a holistic inclusion. Next, how to inclusive city framework will be helpful. I think that this is what we have got. Like, it will be responsive to the varying needs. It will be a very focused intervention, and a credibility will be better. That's absolutely what we are looking forward to. Integration with the other indicators. Now, since in IIA we are already working on that comprehensive audit checklist for different sectors. So I think this will be a way towards that. And this one is the last one, that bringing the marginalized sections as stakeholders. So that's absolutely the way we talk about participatory planning. So this is definitely we look forward to, and we will be very happy if through our ICF we can have the participation and more stakeholders actually getting into the process of planning. And this is the last one, most critical challenges and its implementation. I think already it is similar. Lack of disaggregated data. I think we very much agree to that. This is the challenge that we have faced while we were doing this project, that lack of secondary data. I mean, if we do not have proper data on vulnerable people in a city, so definitely that's a big challenge. Lack of fund, as Antara was already showing, that lack of fund is an issue. Lack of capacity. So probably this is the first step where we move towards more of sensitization and awareness generation and capacity building. We agree, and probably we would be looking forward to some certificate courses that NIUA and IIT Kharagpur are planning, that we would be launching some certificate courses for capacity building. That is very much required. I thank the participants for pointing the need for this capacity building. That's all. I think I will be brief and let the other group give the other group opportunity. That's all.
Thank you, ma'am. It looks like you had a very, very insightful discussion in the group. I would now like to invite Professor Chattopadhyay to give the summary of his group, or if you would like to nominate anyone from the group to give the summary.
Thank you very much, Naveen. Can Monica share the screen?
Hi, Professor Chattopadhyay. I think Monica is having some network issues, so if it's okay, I would like to access the
Please,
PPT. And yeah.
Okay, so the first one didn't have any response. I see. What does inclusion mean to you? So I would request the participants that were in our group to still fill in their answers. I think that's okay, right?
Yes, absolutely, Professor.
So please, I would request all of you to give your feedback on this. This is very important. What does inclusion mean to you? So please fill in your answers. Let's have the second one. So this one, which is the most relevant sector, and there you can see the number one. I mean, some of our participants had problem dragging the triangles and circles, so they put the numbers instead. That's fine. So job seems to be one of the very, very important or relevant sectors, along with mobility and public transport. And the next came citizens participation and governance, and next in order came housing and infrastructure. And some of them also talked about outdoor environment. But I would still like more participants, or all participants, to still fill in. And now that you've got an idea how it was done, so I mean, our whole idea is to make it inclusive. And if some of the participants do not feel that it's including them, then it's not going to work. So whatever barrier you felt you had, please get it clarified and please fill it. We want to make it as inclusive as possible. Your opinion matters. Your opinion counts a lot. So the next question, which is the most lacking sector? Well, we had answers to this. What happened to the responses? I think number one is tourism and mobility and public transport, and tourism have featured as and also outdoor environment. So these have featured as the most lacking sector. How the inclusive city framework will be helpful? So here, a lot of people feel that it will lead to focused interventions. So that is getting a lot of priority, and also some of them felt that integration with other indicators could be important. Better credibility it would lead to is also opined by some. So how the inclusive city framework will be helpful has got this kind of response.
So I think Monica was asking that, one slide was deleted by mistake in the discussion. So
Yeah.
that's completely fine, sir. I mean, if you want to add on to any other things based on your experience in the discussion in the room, that would be great. Otherwise, we can move on to the group number 4. All right. So probably I would like to now summarize the insight which has happened in the Jam board. We faced a barrier since a few of our participants in the Jam board in the breakout room 4 could not access the Jam board. So technology came as a barrier here. So we kind of realized that technology could be an enabler as well as a barrier. So, but we had a very insightful discussion in which we discussed points, some of which have already been covered by Utsav, Professor Banerjee, and Professor Chattopadhyay, and a few other things. One of the most relevant being highlighted by our colleague from Bhubaneswar, belonging to the organization called INA, whom I would like to request after my briefing to give his insights also, is the quality of life. So inclusion means a better quality of life for everyone in every aspect of life. We had a lot of other opinions also about where everyone's individual needs are met. Inclusion also meant planning and designing for one and all, irrespective of their caste, creed, disability, or their special ability, their mental status, their economic status, age, etc. It is basically planning for everyone in the society. So, which was a very comprehensive definition, which was actually highlighted in the Jam board. The next one being, which is the most relevant sector, most of the people actually highlighted housing and infrastructure as the most relevant sector in our breakout room, highlighting that how a person would actually feel excluded when it comes to the very individualistic unit or the smallest unit of our entire urban development, which is house. So how house and the supporting infrastructure to the for the house and house to other parts of the city can actually be enhanced to make an inclusive city. That was highlighted in the second slide, in the discussion in the second slide. The third one, which we could not have a lot of discussion, was which is the most lacking sector, but the polls suggest citizen participation and mobility and public transport being the most lacking sectors. We had an extensive response to the fourth question, which is how the inclusive city framework could be helpful. Majority of the group agreed that it will actually be helpful in focused intervention, where we kind of agreed on better credibility and integration with other integrators. Also, would be one of the benefits of the inclusive city framework. It also, participants highlighted that hearing the voices of vulnerable group would also come up by application of inclusive city framework. It would provide light touch assistance to the cities in creating a universally designed city, and it will also help or assist the city that need guidance. So which is exactly what we intended when we were formulating the inclusive city framework. What are the most critical challenges in its implementation? Again, it was highlighted that data gaps and the disaggregated data which we are actually which would actually be needing for the meaningful implementation of the inclusive city framework probably would not be available. And this highlights that we should be having proxy indicators and or secondary data sources could actually be strengthened so that we can have a more meaningful and impactful application of the inclusive city framework. We also came across with lack of sensitization among citizens, although many projects focus on creating awareness for city officials, and citizen acceptance and behavior, lack of political will, and lack of social consciousness, which have been highlighted. And our colleague from MPD team at NIUA highlighted that role of multi departments in the development of the city actually is something which has been hampering inclusive development to be integrated into the city planning as a whole. also discussed about the importance of social awareness and sensitization of each and every one of us, which is very important in achieving the goal of inclusive development. Now, I would like to invite Sir from INA, who has been giving very, who has given us insights from the ground and very basic things which are lacking in the cities. So, Sir, if you are still there, will you like to?
Well, again, good evening, everybody. I am Mr. Pradyumna Kumarath from Aina, Bhubaneswar. Well, Anjali probably be recollecting me. Long back in 2010, we made a survey on accessibility on 10 districts of the state of Odisha on public buildings. And we have come out with a comprehensive report about their inaccessible status and has submitted it to the state government. 11 year on, we are still looking for the results. Well, this is not a comment, but it's the point I want to raise. Understanding accessibility, understanding inclusion is a much broader concept than just designing things. Well, people who are aware, who are in respectable positions in academics, they understand the nuances and design the thing for it. But when it comes to the implementation aspect, it goes haywire. About something else, that's the what you will sanitation aspect. If I take into consideration, very few cities in India will come to even the standard of average in terms of sanitation. And because of the water leaking, what happens every time in Chennai, and it is going on now itself, is known. And with those all modernization thing taken into consideration, people really, whether they do give their thoughts into it, I don't understand. My city was quite good at drainage in a small population, but when the population grew, now we are having floods with very few rivers or embankment around. We are getting flooded by our own water. So that's one thing. And another angle is how much our people are, how much people do understand disability, how much people do understand other people's difficulty. Is there a sharing nature within us? Unless those things are brought into aspect, even if we design a high tech and all amenity available city, it will not fall into place. I see a citizen awareness, citizen participation much relevant as much as the designing angle. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. I think on this note, social awareness and implementation, as well as making our cities more resilient while making them more inclusive, are the three thoughts which actually are very relevant for taking or refining the inclusive city framework. Disaster will actually add on to the vulnerability of the already vulnerable people. Yes, Anjali ma'am, we have like 5 minutes for the open discussion, and after that, we would wind up. So over to you, Anjali ma'am.
Yeah, thank you, Kanika, and I totally agree with what the gentleman from Aina said. Happy that our training worked well with them. So now they've started talking about quality of life, and also that one thing that always bothers me when I work with designers, although I'm also one of the fraternity members with lot of designers, but I think we need to have a user-centric attitude rather than having a design-centric attitude. So Himanti and myself, when we worked on the Universal Design Principles of India, the first thing that we need to bring into focus, or the first thing that we need to flag, is that who are our audiences, who are our target users, who are the beneficiaries once the design is built. So if we design for the quote unquote user and not just for the sake of making a city inclusive because it is fashionable, it is trendy, the funds are available, I think we will do the best of the designs and we'll have the most accessible and inclusive city. This is what I wanted to say. Thank you.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Miss Anuradha, I think she has written inclusiveness should have a holistic approach, taking into consideration of all sectors identified instead of individual aspects. I completely agree with you, ma'am, and I'm really glad to actually listen to each of you. On this note, I would like to invite Professor Chattopadhyay to conclude the meeting today, which has been a really, really insightful discussion, as well as I hope that it will actually lead to some meaningful outcomes as well. Sir, over to you.
Thank you very much, Naveen. I must say that I'm overwhelmed. I mean, the whole experience was overwhelming, and it was new because we are, rallying around the current problem imposed by the pandemic, and the way we are overcoming it is also making ourselves inclusive. So the way the entire feedback was collected from the length and width of the country probably wouldn't have been, possible in a normal time, so-called normal time. Here we could do wonders. Really, I'm very, very thankful to each and every participant to have, wholeheartedly participated, opened their hearts out, and talked about it. Talked about what they felt are the most relevant sectors, are the most lacking sectors, and what, according to them, uh, becomes the definition of inclusive city. So it was one of the most enlightening sessions, I would say, and I thank NIUA to have designed this in this fashion, and you've really done a great job. To me, if you ask me, that when I got motivated into this work and how I see inclusive city is when I consider that my 81-year-old mother should not feel that she's not able to do a few things which I can do. So that is inclusivity to me. And she stays alone in Kolkata and I stay in Kharagpur. So she should not feel alienated. I feel inclusive city would be that when I will see that little school children feel safe to cross the roads. And I've seen that in Scandinavia, I've seen that in many other countries where there are, traffic awareness week done by children themselves. So they teach adults and they regulate the traffic. So I'll feel very, very, happy the day I feel the small children can go to their school on their own. The parents don't have to really worry. That is when you are making your cities inclusive. We have already identified the 6 sectors, so I'm not going into the details. But these are some of the things when my maid does not feel alienated because she has to fill up some vague form to get a vaccine, then that is not inclusivity. She should also feel empowered that she knows, yes, to get a vaccine, what is it that is required. So when all these, rungs of the society and all these type of people, I'm just leaving out people with, we are considered as temporarily able-bodied. So everybody is temporary. But when everybody, age, sex, or whatever, everybody feels that they are equally empowered, then our success will come. So we have a long way to go, as you have already identified. But kudos to the government that they felt the necessity for this extremely important aspect. And I think we are taking small steps in the right direction. I'm hopeful that we will reach our goals sooner than later. Thank you very much. Thank you very much from the bottom of my heart.
Thank you so much, Professor Chattopadhyay, for your encouraging word. I would now like to just ask Utsav to give a vote of thanks before we conclude the session. Thank you.
Thank you, Kanika. I think it's a tall order to sort of conclude things after Professor Chattopadhyay has spoken. But yeah, today's session has been an exemplary one. I think everyone's participation in trying to sort of reflect on what inclusion means to them and what can be done with this framework. When we take it to the cities, I think that gives me a lot of hope, and there's a lot of work to be done also. But mostly, I would like to thank every single person who has sort of taken the time out in the last couple of hours to be with us, to share their opinion, make the session more fruitful. I would especially like to thank our colleagues from NIUA, our partners in IIT Kharagpur, CIVIS, and I would also like to congratulate every single individual from the city who has actively participated in the session. And we would like to get back to you after the session is over. A special mention to Anjali ji for taking the time out and making the session more bright and adding her viewpoint on it. Also, I think big thank you to Sir from Aina. Thank you so much for your candid sort of perspective on what cities must do and are now doing well. On that note, I think it has been a wonderful couple of hours interacting with all of you, and I do hope you would love to hear more from us, and we would love to hear more from you on the topic. So on that note, I'd like to congratulate you and wish you all a wonderful rest of the day, and have a good weekend. Take care. Bye-bye.